When Ricky was talking about how you can change, how technology can change people, I knew it firsthand. Trying to change a large organization is like trying to steer the Titanic. No, sorry, it's not the Titanic, because some people will do it, some groups will do it, but it is so hard. The technology is the easy part. I think the hard part is going to be convincing people to think differently, and that's actually where I'll start with this today. For me, it's about changing the way you look at it, and it's about only two things. It is about social media, and I know we're talking about crowdsourcing, but bear with me on this. For us in Rappler, we started nowhere. We started with 12 people in January of 2012. And those 12 people, we used social media, and then the next part is when you crowdsource inputs, then you can get big data. This month, the end of May, we hit 19 million views, more than 19 million views. So when you get that much engagement, it then moves into big data. So this is the way I look at it and the way we at Rappler are trying to use it. First, I don't have to go near there. Let's start with perspective. You've seen this, right? We've been talking about how we all come together, and when we all come together, it scales. Every one of us alone in this room has a social network. We have our family and friends, and the way I think about social media is it's just our social networks on steroids. And if you do that, you can take the ant, and the ant, when they all come together, can build this. But what if it's people? What can the human superorganism do? Let's talk about changing perspective. So think that we are here, people in this room, right? But pull up the perspective so you're on top of the roof and you can see the full building. Now pull up further if you were on a plane and you can see more, and that's part of what I want to show you next, because that's the perspective we're after. So, it doesn't play. It doesn't play. Yes, let's try. Okay, it might play, so you can see it. I just thought it's easier when you visualize it, but this is our building. It's wonderful technology. It's so easy to do this now, right? And what it does is it zooms up and out. I don't think it's going to play, but what it does is it pulls up, and when you pull up, you wind up seeing the entire city of Singapore. First you see Bugis, and then you wind up seeing the city of Singapore, the city-state, and then when you pull up even more, you wind up seeing that it's actually in this peninsula, and you can pull up to what I call, this is the perspective that social media and big data give you. I call it, it's not just me either, and it's also not, the Mac doesn't translate to, God's eye view. So when you get God's eye view, what do you get? You get things like this. It's not a Rorschach test. It's actually the human superorganism at different times. And if you look at it with me, this is #Japan. This is the way the Japanese behaved during the earthquake in March of 2011 and then the Fukushima reactor. This is Twitter. This is what they were doing on Twitter. And they do what human beings do when we're faced with a crisis. We look and form hubs around people who give us information. And that's what happens. And who normally does that in times of crisis? It's government, it's broadcasters, hence you can see the news part, right? This one is interesting. It's a few months before the US presidential elections. And there are hundreds of thousands of millions of tweets of Americans. And we just pulled down #GOP. So this is not something we create. This is really behavior of Americans. And is there not a better visualization of how divided they were between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney? Right? It's the human superorganism. Americans were divided. This I love because #Egypt is what a revolution looks like. And if you look at it, right, what you have are these small kind of hubs, and if you compare it to #Egypt, you can see that it doesn't get as large as this. That also makes sense, right? Because they're fighting a government. So you see this kind of implosive kind of action, God's eye view. Compare that to #Syria, where now we've had more than 2 years of a civil war between President Bashar al-Assad and the rebels. What do you have? You have the same thing starting to form. Kind of looks like this at the early stages, right? And you still have these. Again, they're fighting the government, so it's small hubs. The question I have is when this begins to look like this, can we then say that a revolution happened in Syria? Can we predict behavior based on what we do, on the snapshots we can get on social media? Okay, let me bring you to Asia, because of course this is home for me. This is day 44, last year, May 29th. This is the Judgment Day. A Chief Justice of the Philippines was ousted on this day. And this is human behavior of Filipinos. And if you go on our site, just search for tweet impeachment, and you actually can make it it's more interactive. You can zoom in, you can see who's at the center, you can look at your communities, at the communities that were there, and then if we also have a search bar on top, so if you have a Twitter account, you can type in your Twitter account and then see your communities. Why is that important? Because communities are the basis of anything, of crowdsourcing. Communities are the basis of actions. I'll just show you one quick example of why the Philippines. People ask me that. Why are you in the Philippines? Well, because ComScore in 2010 said the Philippines is the social media capital of the world. If I'm going to try to do anything with crowds, it's a great place to be because it's extremely engaged. We have the largest Facebook market in the world as well, and this is just one example. It's, again, a map, a global map. We did the Social Good Summit with Mashable. We ran the Philippine leg of it. There were 5 speakers. He's our Secretary of Tourism, Mon Jimenez. Bianca Gonzalez is a local celebrity with substance. She has 1.7 million Twitter followers. Chris Lau became a local celebrity because he was cyberbullied. And it was the very first time that he came to speak. We had an audience of about 500 people who were live tweeting as we were pulling the blog together. Here's some examples. Twitalizer, you guys know, it's a free program. You can look at it. Impressions, 91,639,692. That's interesting to me because it's like ratings in television, which I'm very familiar with. So you have an idea. A newspaper, the top newspaper in the Philippines, reaches 150,000 to 200,000 people. News coverage, there's a 24-hour English cable station. I used to run that one. That was part of ABS-CBN. That hits at most, prime time, 250,000. When you can hit social media and potentially reach 91 million, you've got something that's kind of strange and definitely a disruption. Bianca, I told you she has 1.7 million followers, so she definitely these are your force multipliers, military terms, right? I don't have as many followers as Bianca, but I have a very tightly knit community. Again, if you use social network theory, I think an earlier speaker talked about how things spread. And strangely enough, how do things spread? They're by the strength of weak ties. It's not the people closest to you who will spread your idea, it's the people who are 3rd or 4th degree away from you. Why? Because then they will spread it to another social network, right? So the Inquirer is our top newspaper in the Philippines. So you can see that. We can map it. Again, this is some of the things we do, and strangely, I discovered it. I forgot to tell you what I used to do. I do terrorism. I spent 2011 in Singapore mapping the spread of terrorism, and those same techniques you can actually use to look at the spread of anything if you're using social network theory. So this to me shows, this is the Philippine leg. Bianca Gonzalez, this is hers. This is the size of the nodes are by eigenvector centrality, which means it's formal and informal power. It's the power to spread. This is another local celebrity in the Philippines, Tim Yap. This is the Philippine footprint. When we took this snapshot and mapped this Twitter map, this is fascinating because this is Mashable, based in the US, right? This is the American footprint. If you guys do nonprofits, you know Beth Cantor just wrote a book that's using social media for nonprofits. So you can see the footprints. The Philippines is large. This is Indonesia, which actually should have a far larger footprint, but it's probably because the organizers it was a smaller group. So again, you can see a snapshot of the way things work. What's Rappler? When we were listening to the wonderful presentations ahead of us, it was fascinating because everyone is zoomed in. Rappler is a lot of things, and I'm not sure that that's a good thing when I listen to you guys. But this is what we are. Our core are professional journalists. You know, we started with 12 of us. They're like me. There are only 4 of us above 40 in Rappler. Everyone else is 20-something. And that's a kind of interesting mix. Because what we've done is we've taken what we know, and actually the biggest challenge is to forget what we know and try to use this new technology to do new things. So you start with the core of professional journalists, you add the technology that didn't used to be there when I was doing CNN, and the last part, I take it off James Suryeki, the wisdom of crowds. Again, remember, I work in a country where institutions are weak. The crowd wants better, and as the government is going top down, I think we can go bottom up, and that's part of what our goal is. This is where Rappler is. And one of the things we do is to actually not just use citizen journalists or embed stories of people from their own communities. We actually actively partner with them. There's an arm called Move PH. This is this wisdom of crowds part, and that is the one that makes us different from a normal news group. But I guess think about it like this. We seed our community. Content is king, right? So we give them journalism to feed our community, but then there are action points that they do, and they can be used by civil society organizations or our advertisers. That is where the wisdom of crowd comes in. I have 3 examples of crowdsourcing to show you. This is the most successful one inside Rappler. We crowdsource the mood of the day. So you saw every story on Rappler has a mood meter. The 8 moods here, we did in conjunction with psychologists and sociologists in the Philippines, because we do these surveys all the time, right? So we talked to them and we said, what are the moods that Filipinos, that appear the most in the Philippines? We came up with this. And then when you look at the story, you click how you feel. And when you click, that then is pulled, every vote is pulled together and aggregated by the mood navigator, which is in the middle of the front page. This came out of this idea. I read from a neuroscientist who said that, 80% of how we make decisions is based on how we feel. It is not on what you think. I spent my whole life fighting that, but now I've embraced it. It's how you feel, right? So this is the mood navigator, and it's in the middle of the front page, but I'm showing you a snapshot Saturday morning because Friday night there was an explosion in the middle of a posh building in the city, in Taguig. And we still don't know what caused it, but essentially the walls of this condominium, brand new, blew out, caused shockwaves so strong that everyone in the area felt it. But beyond that, you can see this is the second picture and this is the third. That's the wall, and it hit this delivery van on the other side of the street and killed 3 people there, right? That happened around 8 p.m. I took this snapshot of our mood navigator around 11 a.m. the next day, and you can look. At 9 p.m., I anchor a daily evening newscast, which of course, the top news were live reports from here. But this is the story that's gotten the most number of votes, blast and surrender, 3 killed, 4 injured. The newscast, which is all open source. Everything that we do is open source. It's on YouTube, and because it actually works to our advantage because YouTube is the 2nd largest search engine globally, right? These are the top 10 stories that people have voted on. These 10 events determine how our readers feel, and they crowdsource the mood of the day. It's something our advertisers are extremely interested in and gives great insight into society. We can look at the moods per month, and I'll just show you what it was like in May. We had elections, midterm elections, May 13th. So people were happy. So this is a daily breakdown, and you can see each of the moods. The colors are here. Happy in the run-up and during the May 13th midterm elections. Then people became angry and annoyed, and you can see the angry and annoyed starting to pop up because the transmission of the automated results slowed down. And then they were happy again with the proclamation of the winners, and then they became angry, annoyed when the anomalies started, when supposed anomalies, they weren't anomalies. But take a look, you can then quantify 77% of the votes on the mood meter, which the mood navigator aggregated, was happy. So it was a happy month. It was a happy month for Rappler. We had good numbers. This is the crowdsourcing that failed. Well, let's say we're coming back for an iteration. We called it #HealthAlert. You know, the Philippines, we have dengue outbreaks during the rainy season. So we created this map. In fact, the woman who created it is here, Gemma and Annalette. It's a map of the Philippines, and in that map, if it's interactive, so if you click this, you're going to get a button that says report. And then we broke it up into the diseases that we wanted the crowd to help us, because again, you know, it takes 3 to 4 years before the government puts up any data on what happened. And when you're trying to stop the spread of a disease, it's important to get timely, accurate information. So we looked at dengue, malaria, leptospirosis, which happens when floods come in, cholera. And then we give you where the hospitals are. Where do you find help? Where do you go to for help? Here's what we learned. One, it's difficult reporting interface. It's too complicated. It's difficult to find it on our site, and it was difficult or impossible to report on mobile devices. Oops, it's not fully protected. That too. The lesson we learned when we were programming for the next one was keep it simple. It's got to be intuitive to make your crowdsourcing effective. This is our next attempt, and this was in time for the elections. The Philippines. No one ever wins or loses an election in the Philippines. They're always just cheated out of it. That's what the politicians will claim. But we decided we're going to go to the crowd and let them tell us, you know, about instances of violence and vote buying, which were the two major problems. This, if you go on our site, there's a slider here, and you can actually scroll and look at it. The people reported it. They report violence or vote buying, and then when Rappler verifies it, we put our mark on it. But people can actually validate it. When they validate it, in the form, they give us a number or an email that we can verify it with. Then we map it. This one was better than our health alert. And you can look at it. Just, again, the breakdown. Remember, you get lots of data, right? 64% was about vote buying, and 36% was about violence. What made it succeed? Simple and structured reporting interface. It was intuitive. We automatically pulled location data so that this way we knew where it was so that it could map it on its own. It's actually, if you're familiar with Ushahidi, we worked with Ushahidi but pushed it up one step further. And then here, my team likes complexity, but everyone wants simplicity. So keep it simple. KISS. You guys know that, right? Keep it simple, stupid. We tell ourselves that all the time. Anyway, so I'll just leave you with this, right? This is the national campaign. This is the kind of insights you can get from the data that you gather through social media. This is the beginning of our national campaigns on February 12th. They started their campaigns. We did the social media conversations and we did the impressions. That's how much, these conversations are the ones that we seeded so that this way we can map it. This is a map of our community, and it looks like a mess to you. Let me zoom it in. This is our political parties. Team Pinoy 2013 and Una sa Senado are the two opposing political coalitions. The Liberal Party is President Aquino's party that works with Team Pinoy, right? Again, this is eigenvector centrality, and the color of the networks, if you're the same color, it means you're part of the same social network. So what do you see right off the top when you map it? You see that the two opposing political coalitions are part of the same network. Filipinos have long thought we don't have political parties. We really don't in behavior. This is what it looks like. This is all one social network with the two opposing political coalitions. And then the only different, this is Rappler in our community. MOVE is a subparticle of Rappler, but the only different political entity is this. Teddy Casino is running for the Senate. He's leftist. And Gabriela Philippines is a leftist organization, along with Pro-Gay Philippines. Basically, the marginalized group came together. That's the only different political entity on this. So again, that's an insight that you get from looking at the big data. You guys know these people? This is the last point I think I want to make for you. This is Jessica Sanchez and Philip Phillips. Last year, they were the last two contestants in American Idol. And it's interesting because, well, you'll see when I show you. Remember my first question? Can you predict real-world outcome based on events, based on the snapshot you have on social media? I think you can. And so we started trying to do it. We didn't want to do it with elections because too many people would be peeved if we were wrong and we'd get killed. The credibility we had would be killed. But American Idol is fair game. So we did a series of stories. The first was, can social media predict American Idol? And look at what we did. We looked at their number of likes. We looked at their followers. We looked at sentiment analysis. Again, all of that is just big data, right? The first part of a crowdsourced thing. This is done by physicists. So they wrote a paper. They looked at where Jessica, this is a kind of distorted United States, but if it looks like a political map, that's what it reminded me of. Just Jessica Sanchez is yellow, and then blue is Philip Phillips, and then gray is undecided. They looked at the geographical polarization. Where is their support? This is the part I like best. Hot spots. Where are people tweeting for this? Yes, the United States is there, but wow, look at the Philippines. That is a major hotspot. Jessica Sanchez is a third Filipino. She's Filipino-Mexican-American. So Filipinos were really in on it, as were Indonesians. So then you can actually put that in a chart. Here's the chart. Jessica Sanchez, yes, wins by a mile globally. And Philip Phillips, well, okay, why is that important? Because while Jessica Sanchez wins globally, it's called American Idol. So you got to look here at the United States, and Philip Phillips wins by a small margin. This paper was published 12 hours before the results of American Idol was announced. We posted it on the site and got lots of hits. Let me put it in the real world, right? We've seen the Arab Spring in 2011, the kind of domino effect that it had. It doesn't spread that far, that fast without this. And if you read Eric Schmidt and Jared Cohen, they wrote The New Digital Age. They talked about how revolutions are now going to be different because of social media. Well, that's one, right? The London riots, the British government talked about shutting off BlackBerry. The riots were planned on social media, but the cleanup was also supposedly planned on social media. And of course, we know Barack Obama did a really good job putting together real world and virtual world to carry his campaign. I'll leave you with one last thing from the Philippines. This is our world today. This is a debate Rappler had. Again, remember, little Rappler had started with 12 people. We now have a little over 70, but this was the largest park in Quezon City. These are 6 candidates for the Senate. We invited them to a debate. This is what they're looking at. So it's very meta. You're looking at what they're looking at. This is at the end of the debate. Ressa Ontiveros, Grace Poe, Bam Aquino. They're the administration candidates. Teddy Casino, Brother Eddie, and Richard Gordon. We did a face-off. In our country, when you do face-offs, it's not like the United States where the candidates can actually debate each other. In our country, it's not quite done as much. So what we wanted to do is to actually take out the intermediary, which is what the online world is telling us, what the groups have done, and to have them throw questions at each other, but timed. And behind them, you have a mood meter that's telling you how audiences feel. At the same time, we were mapping it in the online world. We were mapping the Twitter communities. So what we found in this whole thing here, and I'll tell you what you can find just with the data, is this man, Teddy Casino, and Ressa Ontiveros had the most engaged online communities because they had 5 times the number of votes than the other 4 candidates. But this man, his supporters also voted annoyed on these 3, the administration candidates. So they voted up annoyed and voted him up. You can see this by basically looking at correlations of their community here, drilling it down to see the action. So what can we do with social media and big data that leads to crowdsourcing? Those are the steps. I've shown you the example of the crowd telling us how they feel, and crowdsourcing the mood of the day. It changes every 24 hours. Health alert, we're going to get that in the next iteration. And then Vote Watch. The last part I forgot to tell you is it makes money. Because once you build your community, that's a community that can be tapped for any purpose. And that's what our brands use. So, the power of it, these are the ideas. It comes off of the power of many, and you can use it for many purposes. Thank you.